Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Annalisa. Today I'm going to be telling you about an album I listened to this month and why I liked it. This month's album is Cherry Peel by Of Montreal. So let me start with how I heard about this album, which is I was browsing YouTube and I came across this video, and I'll have the video linked in the description, and the video was titled Tame I Wish You Were Born a Girl, and it had kind of like a student film project type feel to it, and so I was like, let me just click on this, see what this person is doing, and immediately I was very impressed with their film project, and I didn't realize what song it was at first. I just watched this and I was like, I'm really impressed with this, like the way that they conveyed emotion, the storytelling, the cinematography. I'm really impressed with this. And this song, I love this song. What is this song? And so I went and looked it up and I realized it was Tame I Wish You Were Born a Girl by Of Montreal. And when I heard that the band was Of Montreal, that really piqued my interest because at this point I knew one other song by Of Montreal, and that was Of Our Elegant Cast, which is from a much later album. And I heard about that song back in like 2016, probably 2017. Like one of my brother's friends had like sent it to me on Instagram when I was like asking for song suggestions. And it's a really crazy, fun, brain-tickly type of song. So I added it to my library or whatever, and I've kind of been, revisiting it every so often ever since. And I have often wondered what the rest of Montreal's music sounds like, but I've never quite been motivated enough to find out. So then I see this video and I'm like, this is Of Montreal. I really like another song by Of Montreal. And then I realized this song, Tim, I Wish You Were Born a Girl, is from their debut album, which is titled Cherry Peel. And I gave the rest of that album a listen, and I've really enjoyed it, and it wasn't like anything else I've heard in like a while. It was kind of fresh for me, and I thought it was pretty significant, really enjoyable, and more people would enjoy learning about it. So while there's a lot to say about Of Montreal as a whole, Kevin Barnes has had a lot of adventures in his career. I want to focus on the album of the month, which is Cherry Peel, and happens to be Of Montreal's debut album, which was originally released in July of 1997. Other reason I really thought this was a good album to talk about and share with you guys is because it is the debut album of Montreal, who is a band that recorded and released as part of the Elephant Six recording company, or also known as the Elephant Six Collective, which is, sort of a fancy term for a little bit of an exclusive music club that existed in the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s that had a bunch of kind of alternative, twee, indie rockers hanging out. It actually started with the frontman of Neutral Milk Hotel and his childhood friends, and when they came up with what they would thought their record label could be called, they called it Elephant Six, and so it kind of continued as a label onto a lot of the collective's albums when they were actually releasing music. There's a lot of bands under this collective, but probably the most iconic, recognizable one that everyone will care about is Neutral Milk Hotel. I feel like they're pretty, influential in the world of indie music, especially in that time period, regardless of what you think about their actual sound. But being part of this Elephant Six Collective and being friends with Neutral Milk Hotel is actually what gave Kevin Barnes, the frontman of Montreal, the ability to record this album, Cherry Peel. So this album, Cherry Peel, it really started as Kevin Barnes's, angsty high school emotion track, which is a really good way to start an album, I'm learning, because Fiona Apple's Tidal also started as angsty high school cassette tapes. First, I just want to give some of my first impressions, but right off the bat when I listened to it, I was like, you can definitely hear that sort of 1960s psychedelic pop influence very strong, think the Beatles. Also, a little bit of the melody and the harmonies reminds me of another band which is called Starfucker. It's actually written like this. It's not profane in the writing, but you do say you're supposed to say starfucker. Anyway, that band is more of like the mid 2010s, a little bit early 2000s. I think they're still releasing things now. They're also like mainly emphasis on the instrumentals, but some of the components of this album really reminded me of them. Also, the other really big thing that this album reminded me of, Daniel Johnston. Like, Cherry Peel, Daniel Johnston's Hi, How Are You? They're like, I don't know, I feel like they hang out a lot. And this is very pleasing to me, as you may know, if you know me, I'm a pretty big fan of Daniel Johnston. I actually chose one of his songs to be the soundtrack of a short film project I made in college. I also wanted to say the very last thing that this early of Montreal sound kind of reminds me of, especially because of some of the themes and the lyricism and the content of Cherry Peel. It reminds me a little bit of some of the really early car seat headrest recordings you can find on like SoundCloud and stuff, when it was really just like Will Toledo pouring his little gay heart out. Anyway, those were definitely my first thoughts on like, who does this remind me of when I listened to the album for the first time. My favorite song on the whole album was Don't Ask Me to Explain. It's got a little, like, it's a little like surfy, a little like, you know, you can hear the Beach Boys influence, but it's a little bit, you know, obviously the Beach Boys eventually came to influence surf punk. So anyway, it's just a very, very fun song. It gets me hyped up. My favorite lyric from that song is, who will be watching my body when I sleep? Who will I believe in? So, Don't Ask Me to Explain, that's the 5th track on this album. I Can't Stop Your Memory, 3rd track of this album, that's another favorite of mine. I really liked the transition kind of between the two different tones of that song. And my favorite lyric from that song is, I can't gather all the love that I need when I need it. I don't know, it just felt relatable to me. Then, obviously, I've got to say, Tim, I Wish You Were Born a Girl. That one's definitely very Daniel Johnston core. And it is really simple, super acoustic, but just pure, wholesome. I don't know, something about it feels very sentimental, and I highly enjoy it, and it also was the first song of this album I listened to. Finally, a quick shout out to You Got a Gift, which is at the 14th track off the album, and it's actually the very last song, but I really like the message behind that one too. Let's talk a little bit more about who Of Montreal is. So again, in Cherry Peel, it's mostly Kevin Barnes. I think that the original album was recorded with a couple different band members, but then when it was re-recorded and re-released in 1999, I'm pretty sure that Kevin Barnes recorded at least most of it. Of Montreal does still exist. Actually, they've got an album that came out this year, so maybe I'll have to give that a listen. But they're definitely still an active band, and I would say, just like so you know, if you listen to Cherry Peel and then you go and try and listen to the rest of Montreal, now, and it was kind of a slow evolution, but definitely now, their music is very different from how it first started out. I mean, there's definitely some of the same elements, and I think a lot of the bands from that era, from that genre, kind of have evolved throughout their careers, but there's a lot more high fidelity versus low fidelity. Like, Cherry Peel is like lo-fi central, which is one of the things I really love about it. I cannot get enough. Anyway, they have a lot more interesting sounds in their music now, actually. Like, for example, in the song Our Elegant Cast, which isn't even that recent, but is still like, you know, middle of their career, very different sound from Cherry Peel. Very much more electronic based. Cherry Peel has a heavy reliance on an acoustic sound. I haven't really listened to all that much of their recent music, so I'm not really an expert on it. I just wanted to state that, like, in case someone tries to listen to the rest of it thinking it's gonna be some like acoustic lo-fi Daniel Johnston type vibes, and it's not at all. And finally, I just want to kind of like do a little summary of this album, what I really loved about it, and why I think you should give it a listen. It feels very authentic. I know I've said this before, but it almost feels like this really authentic, low-effort version of this sort of like lo-fi tweet pop that is sort of popular nowadays. Obviously not like mainstream, but there's definitely in alternative music nowadays, it's like everyone wants to sound like they are a lo-fi band from the 90s, and this is actually a lo-fi band from the 90s at the time. Kind of like perfect, and like he's like not even trying. I mean, I'm sure he was trying, but it sounds low effort in a way that is really satisfying to me. I don't know why. I also really enjoyed getting to learn about Kevin Barnes and the rest of his band, like, from listening to this album. I think he's a really cool, influential musician. I don't know everything about him, so if he's done something horrible, like, please tell me and I'll stop repping him. But, he is, queer, genderqueer, weird as fuck. I just really like what he stands for, and that he's not afraid to be very original, very out there, and do some untraditional things. In fact, that's actually kind of an element of Montreal's music in general, but especially Cherry Peel, at least, because I know this for sure because I just listened to it, that they're not afraid to introduce some untraditional rhythms and mixing of styles, complex rhythms and syncopation, in a way that maybe more mainstream audiences aren't really used to hearing. And a little bit, it reminds me of like the first time I listened to Fiona Apple's music, where I was really just like, wow, this is kind of not what, like, this music isn't made for audiences en masse, you know? It's made for the point of making the music. Like, that each song that is released how it is because that is the form of the song. It's not adhering to any sort of like mainstream caricature or like guidelines that will make it popular, that will make people like it. It's just kind of like what it is, and it's unafraid to be that, and I really like that. This whole album is just comforting and it's pretty consistent in its sound, and I like that. It makes for a nice cohesive listening experience. If you know all about Of Montreal and you already know about this album, like, tell me about that. That'd be really interesting. But if you haven't, if maybe you're thinking maybe I'll listen to this now, also tell me in the comments. And I hope you learned something, found this interesting. Maybe you're inspired to do a little music digging, music research. And if you have any album recommendations for me, please let me know. I listen to all sorts of music in all different genres. The only thing I don't really like is like contemporary mainstream pop and contemporary mainstream country. Everything else, usually there's at least something I like in there. So I'm really down to explore genres, listen to people's recommendations, and thank you for watching this video.